Welcome to the Writers Are People Too podcast, where you might just find that you shouldn't meet the writer of your heroes. Tonight, we
Uh-oh.
have with us a New York Times best-selling author who lives in a shed with his cat, Isaac Marion. So, other than those two things, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, that really does feel like what my life is all about at the moment. But you mentioned the books, the previous the publishing history, all that already. So what else is there to a person, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, tell me a little bit about what it's like living in a shed on the middle of the wilderness. I feel like so many people in my generation specifically, we all dream of just disappearing and, throwing our phones out the windows and never looking back. And I don't think you've quite done that. It seems like you have some sort of internet connection where you are. But what's it like in general being a little bit disconnected from society?
Yeah, I do still have pretty solid digital connection to the world. My physical connection is very much severed, but I have Starlink internet, so which is amazingly good for how remote I am, and that allows me to do all this kind of stuff. And really, the main disconnection is just in physical proximity and not being surrounded by people and activity all the time. So a big part of it, I mean, that was a big reason that I left my city life to begin with, is I was just tired of spending so much of my time and energy on stuff that just wasn't what was important to me, like social life, basically, and people inviting me to things, and always having the temptation or like the fear of missing out, and just like the constant buzz of like social energy all around me all the time. So living out here is pretty much separated from that. Once in a while, someone will like ask to come visit or something, but for the most part, I'm left alone, except for, digital hooks come out of nowhere to pull me into conversations. But it's like, I think that's enough. I'm fine with allowing, a little bit of interaction, or else I'd probably go crazier. But, yeah.
Well, sorry for pulling you back into the real world once in a while.
It's a necessary evil. So
yeah,
I welcome
do you do
it
any
even while dreading it.
Do you do any like homesteading, or you just make a trip to Costco every month?
I haven't gotten into that side of this life yet, because it's still pretty new. I don't have a house here, so I'm like living in this shed, which has some, the bare functions of running water and electricity, but the rest of the property is kind of like a construction site, and it's the location where the house is supposed to go, that has the septic system and all that stuff, is further down the hill, and so I'm not really getting into the niceties of it all. The aesthetically pleasing, the sustainable, all that kind of stuff is kind of on the horizon, and things I want to do. But right now, it's just like I got to get through this awkward age of being out here. So I make a run. It's an hour to the nearest store, and I go. I actually just got back, stumbled in the door with my big cooler full of frozen food. It's mostly frozen food that I eat out here, because yeah, it's a real pain to buy stuff, but it works.
That makes sense. So what does that do for your creativity? Are you just like alone with yourself all the time, and you're like, I have so many thoughts I got to get on the paper, or is it hard to motivate yourself sometimes?
Well, it definitely helps in terms of just kind of having the desk cleared. There's really nothing going on here except my creative work, and then all the construction work that is off and on. But there's not many temptations to it, so it's very conducive to that work. My work lately has been kind of frustratingly hodgepodge. There's been a lot of different projects kind of happening at the same time, most of which are not my projects. They're like me doing freelance work for other people. So it's like I feel like I haven't really got to explore what my ideal writing process is going to be out here, because so much of my time has been spent like answering emails and doing Zoom meetings with video game companies and stuff that's not really like me making my art. I have had a taste of me making my art, in the early section of when I moved out here, finishing up the last couple of drafts of my newest novel. And that was what I would hoped it would be, pretty much. I mean, it was like I could I could turn off my phone and just do nothing but work on that for days and days. And when I needed a break, I used to do most of my writing in coffee shops when I lived in the city, and that was kind of my office. And it was nice to be able to, leave home and go to the office and kind of switch gears mentally. But the downside of that is that, if you want to take a break, for example, you have to go, you leave your table, you pack everything up, you go walk around the block, you come back, you have to buy another coffee, you have to find another table, you have to set up again. So it's really like, it's hard to get a healthy rhythm throughout the writing day in the city versus here. I just, anytime I kind of get frustrated or I need to take a walk, I just go, trek off into the prairie and take my time and come back, and, I feel refreshed. So
awesome.
It's working, I would say.
Okay, cool. So I was stalking you just before this, and sorry, you're not special. I stalk all the authors that come on. And I was reading about warm bodies, and I was like, I've never even heard of this. No offense to you, never heard of it. But then I was thinking, I was like, I feel like I've heard of this plot before. And then I realized that I had walked in the living room just a couple weeks ago. My wife was watching this, and I was like, wow, that's crazy that like literally just a couple weeks ago, she just stumbled across this movie and then found out about you. And so how does it feel that you're still relevant and making fans over a decade later?
My cat just played the guitar for you. That
nice.
startled me. He actually strummed it walking across it. Thought somebody broke into my shed for a second. Can you restate the last part of that question? Because I got a little distracted by how does it feel to be relevant, right?
Yes. And I don't mean that. I mean, it's a little sarcastic, but how does it feel that people like are still finding out about your work and enjoying it, even if it's on Netflix through weird, a film, man, instead of through the words?
It's a really strange situation that I find myself in, because year after year, there's like this inexplicable tension, or this contrast between the fact that, my work is out there pretty well known, like no offense to you, but most people have heard of it. It's at least because of the movie. Most people have bumped into the movie somewhere. It's on Netflix. It's been on cable. It's been floating around for all these years, and it's they're even there people are watching it in other movies now. Apparently, this new movie Imaginary just came out, where there's a scene where they're sitting and watching the movie. So I think that's when I've officially arrived as part of pop culture. But so it's the movie's out there, and there's like most people have heard of the movie. A small subset of those people know that it's a book. A small subset of those have actually read the book, and then a small subset of those know that it's actually a 4-book series. And so, like, there's this tip of the iceberg thing that I have out there that is connected to me. It is my work, but it's like, I don't get any money from anything that happens with the movie. So no matter how famous the movie gets, it doesn't really affect my life. And so, like, I'm out here, struggling, and it's strange to like, every time people talk about the movie, it kind of sends me into a little head spin, because it's like, it's so weird that, my life is shit. and yet, there's all this glamour still out there that people still know about. People are still consuming, making hundreds of millions of dollars for other people. So it's strange. It's like, I don't know of many other precedents in pop culture where something is that well known, and that, established in culture, and yet everything that came after that is just completely buried. It's like, so it's kind of a trip when I it's almost like it feels like it is from someone else. The movie stuff is like a different version of me that did that, and now I'm like, well, I've heard of him, but it's not me anymore.
Well, sorry for digging the knife a little deep on that one. I didn't think that it was going to go down that route.
No, I mean, it's a big old, it is what it is situation these days. I mean, I said my life is shit somewhat facetiously. It's not like many people would say I'm living the good life out here. I have land and freedom and all that stuff. And it's not exactly comfortable at the moment, but ideally, eventually it will be. So I'm I joke about my situation just because it's, I spent a year shitting in a bucket. It's just because I didn't have a bathroom. I didn't even have an outhouse yet. So it's like the contrast where, people are out there, the movie just pops up on Netflix and it was like number 5 movie on all of Netflix for a few weeks. And I'm out here with my Home Depot bucket taking a dump. It's like, wow, that just doesn't make sense. But people always tell me like, what, how? But I find the humor in it these days.
Yeah. Well, one final question about your lifestyle before we move more onto your writing. But I mean, living in a shed with your cat does sound kind of torturous, and the whole shitting in a bucket kind of thing. What's your long-term vision? Is this, you want to rough it for a while? Is this, good for your creativity? Is this some attempt at building character? Do you want to build a mansion up there eventually? Like, what is this?
No, this is all the shed that I'm living in. It was basically a plan that is still in progress, but it's just taking way longer than I intended. So there's a site, it's a building site on this property that is supposed to be where the house is. And there's power, there's a septic tank. It's all ready to go. And I was going to be building that like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. And basically it took, it took about a year from buying the land to get a well drilled here so they could have water, and then to get power connected. And then I wanted to start living out here, and I was floating around and I needed a place to be. And so I thought, well, eventually, I'm going to need a storage shed out here anyway. And that's, so planning ahead, I need a shed. Might as well make it a little bit bigger and have a little section on the end of it that I can use for like a guest house or something in the future. So I got this shed out here, and I'm like, and in the meantime, I'll just crash in here while I work on getting this house built. And so I, built out the interior of this shed to be kind of like a little room. It has a little mini kitchen and a sink and a mini fridge, and everything's mini. I can barely. I live in a constant state of claustrophobic panic because just constantly bumping into things. That's my bed right behind me. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so the plan was always to build a house, certainly not a mansion, but a modest cabin. It's going to be small, not quite a tiny house, but a small house. And the house that I was supposed to be building basically spent about half a year getting the designs set up and getting the permit for it, and then the contractor finally did his estimate for it, and it was about 4 times what he originally told me to expect. So I was like, you know what, never mind. Got to start over again. So that's what I'm doing right now. I've got another plan right now for another type of house, even smaller house. And I was about to pull the trigger on that, as it was going to be like a little prefab cabin kind of thing. And then I ran into a neighbor who happens to be kind of a hobbyist builder. And he was like, you know what, if you give me those plans, I could probably build the same thing, much better. And so here we go again. I'm back in the hypothetical world. So yeah, ideally, one way or another, there's going to be some kind of structure here by the end of this year. I, knock on wood, this is happening. But yeah, my whole life for the last year or so has pretty much been just trying to scrape up the money to build something. So I've been taking a lot of gigs. All those freelance jobs I mentioned are kind of like, some of them I might not have taken under normal circumstances, because it's just like I need to work on my stuff, but I don't really have any time to work on my book right now because I'm just constantly getting fed gigs by these various companies. So
you briefly alluded to working with video game companies. For my own indulgence, what are you allowed to talk about what you're doing with that?
I can. The first one that I joined is public. It's called The Bazaar, and it's supposedly going to be launching this year. But it's kind of a strategy card game kind of thing, and they hired me to write the dialogue for the characters. So it's a very lightweight kind of writing gig. Like there's no real story or narrative in this game. It's just kind of like things for the merchants to say, and the heroes yell things in battle. It's like really lightweight, but they wanted it to be snappy and witty and stuff. So I did my best to do that, but it's not really like a, writing in the sense that you would normally think about it. It's more like almost closer to like copywriting than writing a story, because it's just like, how can I have this character, say something in 2 seconds that says what's happening in the game, defines their personality, and also like gives a little bit of world building for the setting. So it's a lot of it was a challenge when I'm used to having, you know, hundreds of pages to write these rich, engrossing stories. So that's the game that's public, and that's just been kind of like a piecemeal thing. Like every couple of months they'll say like, hey, we added a new character, you know, how much to write 20 new lines or something, and I'm like, well, I'll squeeze it into my spare time. The other game is much more is a much more significant project. It's like a really like adult narrative game with like a real story, and you know, basically kind of like writing a movie. And that one I can't say anything about, as far I can't even say like who the company is yet, because they're waiting for like this special moment when they'll announce it and kind of like revive interest in the game, because it's been in development for a while. So
what's it most like? Is it like Skyrim? If you know anything about video games, like what can you like mostly pair it with?
I think the games that it's more similar to are ones that I haven't actually played. I think as far as ones that I'm personally familiar with, it would be like more in the vein of like maybe Detroit Become Human kind of thing, but it's much smaller than that. It's like an intimate scale. But as far as like the kind of cinematic style of, you know, scenes happening and then you make a choice or something or things like that, it's kind of more in that vein. But it's kind of more like, there's a lot of indie games that I would compare it to, where they're kind of like you're solving a mystery, or I've heard some comparisons to Life is Strange, but I haven't played that. I feel like that one's a little more kind of cartoonish in the art style and everything. This is very, very hyper real. So it's a pretty unique game, honestly. Like I'm not really sure what to compare it to, because it's I mean, they've described it as like psychological horror, but it's very grounded. It's like pretty much, you know, a real person in real settings with, you know, a few little twists and kind of the psychological element of it. So it's yeah, my part of it is basically I help them come up with, you know, the narrative beats of the story of as far as how it all plays out. And then at some point I'll be actually writing a script for all the dialogue exchanges. So
okay. Well, you know, we've been talking about your small projects now, but what's it like? Let me rephrase this question. What does it take to write a New York Times bestseller?
I have no idea.
A good story and a lot of luck, or what?
I don't think there's any formula to something like that. I mean, any breakaway success is mostly luck, I think, or luck, not necessarily luck from the industry perspective, but just stumbling across the right combination of things that just resonates in that moment. And there are a lot of essential elements that also have to be present. I mean, you can't just write an absolute trash book and then have everyone love it, although there are cases. but yeah, I mean, I think the stuff that's in your control is just, you have to come up with an idea and be able to sense that there's potential in it. I guess that was one thing, you know, when I started writing the book, I had, on the one hand, I thought, you know, this premise is so like hard to digest. It's so like off-putting. It's like, okay, he's a rotting corpse, but this girl's going to fall in love with him. It's like, wait, what? No one's going to like that. So part of me was thinking like, no one's going to like this. But there was another sense that like, you know, there's something about these elements that combines in a really interesting way. It feels kind of like when you mix the right chemicals together and you just start to feel a reaction happening. And I think with everything I've written and all the things that I plan to write in the future, a big part of that process is sort of just trying to get an intuitive sense for what kind of a story is worth pursuing, what has enough like potential and much enough volatile chemicals in it to be able to become something interesting. Because a lot of stories, like I've started books before that I thought were going to be great, and very shortly into the process, I just kind of realized like these ingredients aren't connecting. They're not catching on fire. And I think there's just something about this idea that's sort of inert And it's important to be able to recognize that. And that's probably, I feel like that stuff is probably a much bigger factor than craft. You know, craft is important to me, but I don't think it's important to a lot of readers. Like a lot of the books that are really popular are not particularly well written. Like they're not masterful in any sort of way. They found some ingredients that connect, that explode together, and they put them together and it worked. But you know, they aren't necessarily great storytellers even. It's just like, hey, these ingredients work. And so I feel like that's 80% of it. And then you have to, if you really want it to be a good book, which is not necessarily the same thing as a successful book, then you can optionally use craft and storytelling ability to actually try to make it good. But that's less important, I think.
Yeah, well, and that's one thing that I've seen when talking with authors on here is there's the artistic side and then there's the business side. And you have to be clear, one, for yourself, like, what am I doing this for? Am I doing this for the craft because I love it? And there's nothing wrong with that. But then there's also I'm going to put all this time, and maybe I'm going to write something away that I don't want to because I know it'll sell better, because it's a business as well if I want to make a business. So yeah, being honest with yourself about what you want to do with it, I think, is important as a writer.
Yeah, that part of it has always eluded me, really. I think I sort of accidentally stumbled into it with Warm Bodies, where the idea that I wanted to do just happened to have some commercial elements that commercial people could recognize. But a lot of the stuff that I've made in all sorts of different mediums, music, art, visual art, writing, even videos. I mean, right now my YouTube channel is kind of like everything that you're not supposed to do in terms of every industry has its own set of rules, but there's all these things where the thing that I rub up against the most is that everyone, you're supposed to just make things one thing. Like everything's supposed to fit neatly in a box. And they want to, an easy, the elevator pitch. Like I need to be able to describe it in 2 sentences and have people immediately click as to what the whole thing is about. And that's not the kind of thing that's ever interested me. The things that I like to consume as art are always multi-layered. They're always like merging different things together. And that's usually the kind of things I like to create too. But it's like, I'm a PR person's nightmare, where everything I make is like hard to explain. Even the game that I'm working on right now, which I didn't come up with, but they're running into the same issue where it's just like they have this, nuanced, complex story, and they have, higher ups being like, I need you to condense it to 1 element. And they're like, but it's 3 elements. Like it can't be 1 element. So yeah, it's, I don't know. It's frustrating. I have thought about like, could I play the game correctly if I just decided to? And I guess I probably could, but I wouldn't enjoy it. And so what's the point?
I'm kind of experiencing something similar with my YouTube channel. As far as what content I want to put out because I find it valuable versus what people want to watch. And it's like people want to watch something that's flashy with some dingly noise and maybe they'll laugh and it's like 15 seconds long. And my content is not that. It's like 2 people having a deep conversation, sometimes philosophical, sometimes educational. And so it's hard to find the audience. I think there are people that want to watch that kind of stuff, but the people that are just scrolling on their shorts for their lunch break for 5 minutes are not the people that want to watch this kind of stuff, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, you have to give up on shorts for one thing. I've done a fair amount of research into the YouTube ecosystem, and the general consensus is like shorts and long form videos might as well be 2 different platforms. The audiences don't cross over. You can get a bunch of followers on shorts who will never ever watch your long videos, and vice versa. And so like it might as well be a separate app. You kind of have to pick which one you're gonna court, because if you do one, it'll turn off the other. So
yeah, well, thank you for that, because I've actually heard that like 3 times now in the last month. So I guess it's time to parse it out.
I post shorts once in a while as just basically trailers for my long form videos, and once in a while if I have something really specific that's kind of like I recently posted one that was sort of just an introduction to me and my whole Warm Bodies shenanigan that got me to where I am, and things that are kind of separate from my main niche that feels like, well, why not? It can't hurt. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it the short form thing, I mean, whether it's YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram, etc., it really is a different. That's sort of why I started YouTube. Actually, is I'd been using Instagram for years and years and trying to do these, like, trying to make things that were, slow and thoughtful in that space. Like, I would do videos that were basically poetry with beautiful visuals, and like I'd make this ambient music to go over. It was like very calming and kind of like you kind of zone out to it, and that's
Mhm.
it's not meant for those formats. And anything really of heft and substance does not fly on those platforms. So like
Yeah.
YouTube is the only thing I can think of that, well, they actually reward longer videos, and mine aren't even generally that long, but it's like I have room to breathe. Also, it's horizontal, so I don't have to cram it. I'm kind of struggling even
Yeah.
in this chat, making all these hand gestures, and everybody's, you can't see what I'm doing here. So I'm like,
Yeah. So I actually did look at a couple of your videos on your Instagram, and I didn't. It was light stalking, okay, and I actually appreciated how down to earth you were and vulnerable in a couple of things that I saw. And one of them, it had to do with, I think it was originally a TikTok video, but you were talking about your publication journey. And one of the things you were mentioning is some difficulties you had self-publishing one of your books. So, as someone who's been both traditionally published and self-published, what are the positives and negatives of both?
okay, well, I will preface it by saying that my self-publishing experience was a bit non-standard, because vast majority of people doing that route nowadays would be just going through like the main channels, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, all that stuff. And actually, vast majority of self-publishers are just doing ebooks only these days. Like, nobody even bothers with print. So what I did was kind of this weird situation where my agent had started this new company of like a online book selling widget, is what he called it, kind of like a storefront that I was able to put on my website. And I actually printed like a stash of copies that he stored in his warehouse, and he was handling the distribution for it. So it was like this very hands-on kind of like DIY operation, as opposed to just like pushing a button and having Amazon send it around the world, which have been so much easier. But the thought at the time was like, I have this sort of built-in audience who has followed the Warm Bodies series all the way to the end, and that those people are almost certainly going to buy this last book. And beyond that, it's much harder. How we're going to rope in a new audience without any marketing engine or anything. So the thought was kind of like, well, maybe it makes more sense to just do something that like maximizes profit per book, basically keep almost all of it, and just sort of have a limited print run. And but hoping that by the time that sold out, we would have figured out this whole situation and got back in the good graces of traditional publishing. And so the way I did it, I mean, it was all on me to do all the promotion. I mean, there was no infrastructure for it, so it was just like me buying ads on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and spending my own money. And I guess like the biggest difference between traditional and self-publishing, no matter what format you're doing, is just availability. The traditional publishers basically don't even do marketing anymore. Like even with, the direct sequel to Warm Bodies, which was, a big bestseller, a big hit, they put in like a couple $1,000 maybe into the whole marketing campaign. It was, they prefer to kind of like throw books out there and just hope they get lucky. And they don't really sit and invest anymore. So the main thing the publishers do is they have a sales force that will allegedly get your book into bookstores and get it out, to all the retail channels. And that's the one thing you really can't do self-publishing. Like technically you can, there all the sources that you can do it on will trumpet that, like, oh, you can get it in bookstores, just you have to have an account or whatever and it'll happen. But in reality, it's almost impossible, because you'd have to be maybe like your local bookstore that you have a relationship might stock some. But as far as widespread availability, as far as I understand, it's more or less not done, because, you know, how are you going to convince Barnes and Noble's 5-state away that they should stock your book based on, you know, your Amazon sales or something? It's just complicated. So, you know, in my case with The Living, the last was the final Warm Bodies book. It was just really frustrating because people couldn't find the book anywhere. And I was, every day I'd be getting messages from people being like, hey, I loved Warm Bodies. You know, I read the sequel. Where can I find the last book? I've heard there's a 4th book. You know, where is it? And I can't find it in my library. I can't find it in my bookstore. And like, you can't find it because it's not anywhere else. Go to my website, make an account on this weird startup retailer that you've never heard of before, that you're going to be scared of, to enter your credit information. And so it was like this filter, like squeezing people down this narrow funnel, and only, you know, the best of the best readers would actually go all the way to the end. So it's just really frustrating, because you want to just be like, hey, the book's out there, go get it. You know, wherever you like to buy books, it's there. And that, so I hear a lot of people in indie publishing talk about like, well, you make so much, you keep so much more of the profits, right? And I'm like, yeah, but would you rather keep, you know, just throwing out numbers, 80% of 1,000 books or 10% of 100,000 books? And it's like, however the math works out, I personally would rather sell, if you know, make the same amount of money, I'd rather sell 1,000 books and make the same amount of money as 10,000, because then I have more readers. And I just, at the end of the day, it's more important to me to like have people sharing those stories with me than it is to maximize my profit per book. So I'm always going to take the option. Well, it's like, I mean, I want to make money too, but I need, there's a balance to be found. You know, I'm not going to do an option where I make no money, but I would rather make less money per copy and sell more copies, because I get more satisfaction out of just like knowing that people are reading the book. And that's sort of what got me into it in the first place, was just wanting to share what was in my mind. And can't really do that when I just am selling, you know, a tiny limited print run basically out of the trunk of my car.
Yeah. You know, what you just said reminds me of one of my favorite quotes that I throw out once in a while. It's, and I forget who said it, but they said, writing is an act of ego, and we might as well admit it. And that's if to say, like, I think what's going on in my head is so important that I have to put it out there for everyone else to see, just so they can see what's going on in my head.
Yeah. But it's optional. I mean, I'm not making anyone do it. It's just like, all of life is kind of is that similar process. You know, we're everybody picks, you know, you get dressed in the morning, you put on clothes so that other people can see your style or whatever. Like you choose this shirt over that shirt because you think it looks good and someone's going to see it. And you know, you have your job, life is all kind of a performance in some way. And we express ourselves to other people and hope that, you know, that draws other people to create connections with us. And it's all kind of a big messy show that we're doing for each other in order to find connections with people. Because, you know, it's like the whole animal kingdom. Everybody has their plumage and they make their calls and squeak into the forest, and they find others of their own kind. And it's like this, it's a communication, really. It's how I've always seen it with writing, is that it's like me writing a book is kind of like sending a message in a bottle out into the ocean, and somebody's going to find it and maybe they'll write me back. And, you know, it creates a connection.
Yeah, 100%. Well, now that we've talked about your past life up until now, and we spent so much time on that, let's talk about what you have coming up next. So your current project, the Overnoise. You sent me an elevator pitch. You said it's about a musician trying to cope with a rapidly changing world after a new internet technology creates a global noise that begins to drown out everything she cares about. So many authors, they write about what they know and what's close to their heart. So I was going to ask if you're a musician, but I clearly see a guitar behind you. So tell me a little bit about your musical journey.
That wasn't set up as a prop, I swear. That's just the only place I have to store it, because I have literally no storage in here. You'll also see piles of clothes and books back there. So, yeah, I've always kind of done a little bit of everything. I've dabbled in a lot of different creative fields, and I used to shuffle pretty regularly between fields. I would do a big project in one field, like I got really into painting for a while. I made a bunch of paintings. I did like a couple local gallery shows, and then I was just like, okay, done with painting. Music, I'd learn how to play music, record an album, push really hard, get some local radio play, and then be like, all right, done. I'm gonna write a book now. And just kind of like I would rotate between mostly those three, and I would do a project in one field and then just sort of drop it and move to the other one. So I eventually kind of decided I had to prioritize or sort of pick a path through that maze, and the other I chose writing, and the other two kind of got demoted to hobby status. And that is sort of my I still dabble in all of it. And lately, you never know when one of those is going to come up and become useful again. Like I hadn't played music for years, many years, like at all. Not even because I didn't even have instruments in my house, because I've been living in the shed for 3 years. But and then I started making these YouTube videos, and you're like, you know what? Now is probably the time to dust off those instruments and start recording music. So I got back into it. I make the music from all my YouTube videos, and so I've always kind of had a little toe in that water. And yeah, I was more serious about it. When I was 23 is when I started my first band, and wanted to make a go of it. And I did one album with a band, and then the band dissolved, and I did one solo album, which when I was, I guess, 20, I don't know, 24, 25 or something. It's 2007, whenever that was. And then I kind of decided, like, this isn't really a career I want to pursue, but I always sort of had thought, like, I'd still like to record more music for just, actual music for its own sake, as opposed to soundtracks for things. But it's kind of one of the many things that are waiting on the shelves for, like, that mythical huge block of free time that I'll supposedly have someday to tinker with hobbies. Hasn't come yet.
Yeah. So if it's not a spoiler, what is this new internet tech and that's creating this worldwide noise?
Well, it's basically it's hard. This part is hard to elevator pitch because it takes a lot of kind of technical and sociological explanation as to why this is what it is. But it's basically a network, a global network of signal generators that creates kind of like universal Wi-Fi that is basically covers the whole planet, and it's unlimited speed. So it provides access to everyone. The remote deserts, top of Mount Everest, wherever you are, you have maximum, like, unlimited, no latency bandwidth, which is more significant than it sounds on the surface when you get into kind of the tech world, because you see how many technologies and things are kind of bottlenecked by the signal speed, and how if you're able to actually just remove latency entirely, the net effect is like everyone is omnipresent and omniscient at all times, because you could have, you could have a device this big that taps into the cloud that has, infinite processing power and can do anything you want, even though it's, in your glasses or something. And so that's already kind of a thing. Like, you can play video games over the cloud. If you have a crappy computer, you can use a good computer somewhere else to play a video game, but it's limited still in terms of, like, the practicalities of it. So it's basically like a new format of device that comes into play, where now all these industries jump on it, and they can start creating devices for it that sort of transform the world. And so it's, like, very lucrative. All these different industries are jumping in on it, and it's sort of embedding online experience into just every crevice, like the Internet of Things concept, where, like, your washing machine has this AI inside it, and just, like, everything can be everywhere because it's it's infinitely scalable. And so it's very attractive for everybody trying to make money and trying to invade the human experience on the molecular level. But then there's this downside that it first starts out, and they wake up the next day, and there's this hum in the background. Like, we're all hearing this hum, and it's around the entire world. Everyone's hearing it, and, like, well, that's annoying. I'm sure they'll get it fixed soon. And they this announcement, oh, we need to calibrate the network, and just a few bugs we have to work out to get this thing going. And little time goes on, it hasn't fixed it yet. And it's like, well, we're working on it and blah blah blah. And so it's kind of this frog in the boiling water situation where what starts out as like a very minor irritation that is assumed to be temporary, little by little it kind of becomes accepted, and that causes, you know, increasingly escalating changes in the way that culture works and the way that the kind of the landscape of the world, particularly for a musician. But that the fact that they're musicians is just makes it worse. But it's also, you know, observing the effects that it has on life in general and kind of the human experience in general. So just really what it's about is like all the things that we're sacrificing to make life easier and cheaper and more convenient, and like the sort of fundamental human experiences that we're like, well, it's going to happen. So like, just don't worry about it. Well, you just get used to it, or just always getting used to it. And, I feel really strongly that is happening in so many corners of life now. And it's weirdly rare to see people like recommending that you slow down and acknowledge what we're losing in that process. It's just always like forward, never stop and look around and be like, hey, you know, we used to have that, now it's gone because we got the price of music down by 50 cents or something. And so it weighs heavily on me. Music is a very specific example for it, but you know, you've seen that happen with streaming and everything, where it's just literally being squeezed out of existence in order to make it cheaper and easier. And we're all doing it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm glad that you answered that question ahead of time. Well, actually, no, I'm a little bitter because now I didn't get to ask my question. But what I was thinking was, as I was reading that book blurb, it's like, what could this be metaphoric for? And I was thinking specifically like social media in general and how much of our attention is taken away from the little things in life, like just for quick dopamine hits. Like I'm guilty of it. My little girl will be sitting next to me and she'll be like, "Daddy, come play." And I'll be like watching an Instagram video or something. And it's like, okay, why am I paying attention to this instead of my daughter that's right next to me? And so what to you is the main thing that's getting drowned out in our current world by technology?
I feel like the low-hanging fruit for that animal that's eating everything is just like all the subtle experiences of life. It's not a one's particular thing, but it's just like anything that is soft and quiet is first on the cutting room floor. Like, you know, movies, for example, like everybody, they're having to like change the sound design and everything because everyone will just, you know, they watch movies on their phone in a loud environment, and you know, so they have to put subtitles on because they can't pay attention to it. And it's just like, okay, well, everything has to get louder, has to get, you know, more rapid, and all the kind of quiet parts of life are the first to go because they, you know, anything that requires a little bit of intention and be like, I'm gonna take a step to have a good experience here and have like the best version of this experience. That stuff is all kind of seen as like luxuries. And it's like across the board. It's the kind of the natural earthy parts of life. The quiet moments are just, they're not profitable. They're not worth it, I think is what a lot of people are assuming. And, you know, like I did a lot of research into the music industry while writing this book because that's sort of a vehicle that I'm using to explore all that. And just like the stats of things, it's pretty amazing. I mean, now I think it was something like 80% of all music is consumed on mobile devices now. Like hardly anybody is listening on stereos anymore. Like there are a handful of audiophiles out there, but it's like this tiny niche for anybody who like cares about how the music sounds. Most people are just on their phones or even like computer speakers, or just, it's always a phone or a computer. And so something like that, it's like, yeah, I mean, and I do it too, because it's just like, I don't have space for my speakers anymore. And I am just like so busy and it's so hectic, and like, I'm not going to sit down and, you know, put a record on and sit down and enjoy this whole album like I used to 20 years ago. Like a new album would come out from a band that I liked, I would make a make a meal of it. I would sit back and just like listen to the album. That kind of experience is totally archaic now. Like nobody listens to albums. People just have playlists and they're just rushing through their day doing 10 other things at the same time. And so those kind of experiences are just, becoming obsolete. And I feel like we're losing little pieces of our soul every year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you said something a minute ago, which, to paraphrase, because I don't remember exactly what you said, but it was like, they're doing it all for profit. And obviously, like, people need to eat, you need to eat, I need to eat. But I hope that the world does not lose the art that's within all of us just to make a quick buck. And again, I'm guilty of it too. I'm getting ready to just start doing funny little shorts instead of philosophical, thought-provoking shorts, because that is what will get people's attention. But I hope that the entire world just holds on to art instead.
I hope so. I mean, I do believe it's a two-way street. I mean, like I'm very clear in the telling of that story in the book that this is not like, if only the corporations would stop destroying the world. No, we're just as complicit in the process. They're giving us exactly what we asked for, and you can't blame them any more than we can us. I think we have to be honest about like that they're doing it for profit. We're doing it for ease and just,
Dopamine.
laziness, basically. Yeah. Like we want the quick fix. We want everything easy and cheap and right now. And people will sacrifice almost all the other traits of the experience for those things, like quality, just depth, all that stuff. If it can be fast and cheap and easy, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have to figure it out within ourselves somehow.
Yeah. All right. Well, we came up on time right now. Any final words before I let you go?
Just in general, or
about anything.
I mean, I guess go to my website, isaacmarion.com.
Don't be afraid to put in your credit card information.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not doing that anymore. Those books are long sold out. I'm not actually selling anything right now, so I don't have like a plug other than my YouTube channel is like my main focus these days. Outside of my, career projects, my YouTube is like my main hobby, where I've been really enjoying getting into video editing. Is kind of like the one art form that I haven't really tinkered with much until recently, and I've just been having a lot of fun with that and telling the stories that happen out in this weird life I'm living. So it's Outer Edge Outpost. If you look that up on YouTube, that's
awesome. I'll put a link in the description.
Cool.
All right, Isaac, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it, and I'll catch you another time.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.